Sorry, so we'll start again with Ted Cruz. So Ted Cruz, born in Calgary, in Canada, son of a Cuban migrant. Moved to Houston, went to school in Katy and in Houston, and then went to university at Princeton and then subsequently Harvard, where he went to law school. He served as a clerk for the U.S. Court of Appeals and then subsequently for Judge Rehnquist on the Supreme Court, the only Hispanic clerk in the Supreme Court at the time. In 1999, he joined the George W. Bush election campaign as an advisor, and then subsequently assisted during the Bush versus Gore court case of 2000. In 2003, the then Attorney General Greg Abbott, now the governor, appointed Ted Cruz as the Texas Solicitor General, a role that he performed until 2008. The Solicitor General is kind of like I suppose an assistant to the Attorney General, but not an assistant Attorney General. At that point, he went back to private practice, and in one of his high-profile cases, he represented the pharmaceutical company Pfizer, who'd been accused of overcharging. In 2012, he ran for the Senate, back into politics, and he actually lost to David Dewhurst in the primary, but in the runoff primary, won 57% of the votes. So again, the issue of runoff primary is quite important for prominent Texas politicians. In the Senate election, he won by 1.3 million votes. So what does Ted Cruz stand for? Well, he's against the Affordable Care Act. He is against felons obtaining guns. He's pro-voter ID, voted for voter ID. He's pro-Keystone Pipeline, the pipeline that has long been mooted for bringing Canadian oil down to the US. He proposed a Senate bill which would deny visas to ambassadors from countries that have been accused of spying in the United States, a bill that was signed into law. Otherwise, he's anti-abortion, he's anti-gay marriage, he's pro-death penalty, and he opposes net neutrality as well. You can look up what net neutrality is if you're interested. It's quite a significant civil moment. Ted Cruz succeeded the first female to represent Texas in the Senate, Kay Bailey Hutchison, who's originally from Galveston. Her surname comes from her former husband, Ray Hutchison, who was a former Texas representative. In 1972, Kay Bailey Hutchison was first elected. She was something of a wonderkind. She got her BA from the University of Texas at the age of 19. In 1990, she was the Texas State Treasurer, which is an office that no longer exists. It was abolished in 1996, leaving Texas as the only state without a state treasurer. And in 1993, after Senator Lloyd Bentsen was appointed as George H.W. Bush's Secretary of the Treasury, she won a special Senate election. That was despite indictments on misconduct charges for her time during her time as Texas State Treasurer. In the first proper election in 1994, she won by 1 million votes, and then increased her majority to 2 million in the 2000 election. Now, she had sworn that she would only serve 2 terms. She was someone who was in favor of reforming the tenure of senators to limit them to only 2 terms, much like the president. But then ran a 3rd time in 2006. In 2010, she ran for governor but lost to Rick Perry. She was running as a moderate, pro-choice Republican and received some fairly significant endorsements, such as George H.W. Bush himself, James Baker, the former Secretary of State, Dick Cheney, the former Vice President, and Nolan Ryan as well, the baseball executive who is now. All endorsed her, but she lost to Rick Perry. In terms of her politics, she was opposed to stalling the Affordable Care Act. She has a nuanced stance on abortion, quite unusual for a Republican, but not so unusual for a female politician, perhaps. She's pro-single-sex education, and she also had her least favourable rating by anybody was a 0 rating from conservation groups. She improved her conservation rating to 13 before she left office. Still not very good because that's out of 100. So finally, the last person I wanted to talk about was a local representative called Debbie Riddle. If you remember the video we watched about voter ID, you remember Debbie Riddle as the Texas representative who votes for other Texas Congress people in during sessions. She's the person who reaches over to the table behind and votes for the person who's not sat there. Or in some cases, the person who is sat there and just doesn't pay attention. So Debbie Riddle is soon to be ex-Texas representative. She recently lost the Republican primary for District 150 to Valerie Swenson. She's a horse breeder by trade. There's a couple of reasons I want to bring her up. Is just to kind of emphasize a couple of recurring issues that we see, not just in Texas, but in Southern politics as well. In 2003, she gave a speech known as the Pit of Hell speech, which is when she said that a country that offered free education and free medical care would be like the pit of hell. So obviously she's very anti those things, despite being a state representative, someone who doesn't make very much money, someone who obviously interacts with quote-unquote the ordinary people on a daily basis. We talked in class as well about the House Bill number 1, the so-called bathroom ordinance. Unfortunately, this is something that has been passed into law by the state of North Carolina in the last couple of days, and I don't think we've heard the end of it anyway. So last year, Debbie Riddle authored, during the 84th legislature, House Bill 1748, you can look it up online. This bill provided for the jailing, the imprisonment, or the fining of transgender people who were caught using public restrooms that did not match their birth chromosomes. It also provided for the fining and or jailing of business owners who facilitated transgender people using bathrooms that did not match their birth chromosomes. How she was going to administer this, I don't know. The bill was actually quashed in the Texas House. So, something to think about. But an interesting issue, I think, and one that is becoming very common across southern states. The bathroom question, the men and women's bathroom question. Okay, so that's everything for class. We will hopefully catch up with anything else in class on Friday.